everyone. I'm Ruth Simons, that you can see in the top right here. And thank you for joining us, and we hope you're all keeping well, working from home. And welcome to our webinar on science tools. So I'm Ruth Simons. I'm the project lead for the Howe Sound Biosphere Region Initiative, and I'm pleased to be presenting from the village of Chichioy at Quilcan, Lions Bay. As you can see this beautiful picture behind me. I'm pleased to be here on the unceded territory of the Squamish Nation in beautiful Akatsum Howe Sound. This webinar is being recorded, and the slides will be available if you wish to adapt them to your use for sharing with your associates or members, unless anybody, my co-presenters, have any problems with that. But our contact information is all available. And I think the idea is that the more people that we can get using these tools, the better. So I'm sure many of you are used to using web meetings by now, and if not, it's going to become part of our daily lives possibly. So you know the drill, and if you can mute yourself if possible, and we'll keep the videos off. We'll eventually be, eventually we will not have the only videos that'll be on. And Lee, if you could just turn your video off right now, that would be helpful to save some bandwidth. And then we will, and also as I mentioned, there is the chat box down below. So if you have any questions, just type them into the chat box for now. There is room for questions during the webinar. So as I mentioned, I'm Ruth Simons, and we're hosting today. So I'm going to allow each of the presenters to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm the Citizen Science Project Coordinator with the BC Parks iNaturalist project, or for the BC Parks iNaturalist project. And you can see my email contact information right there if you have any questions.
Hello, I'm Judith, and I'm the initiator and project lead for Biodiversity Squamish, iNaturalist.
Good morning, I'm Mike Shasko. I'm with FLNRO, the Invasive Species Database Specialist. I'm going to be talking about reporter weed today, but I'm also working as product owner for the new invasive species application that's being developed here in Victoria for invasive plants and animals and fish.
Okay, thanks everyone. So the tools that we're going to be talking about today are available downloading from either whichever phone system you're using or whichever technology you're using. We're also going to be referring to the website for iNaturalist as well as the BC site for invasive species. So those are the icons that you're looking for if you haven't already downloaded those tools. And if you have any questions, technical questions or anything at the end, let's save those for the end. I'm not a technical wizard, but we can see if we can help you if you're having trouble with any with downloading any of these apps. So the Akatsum Howe Sound region has extraordinary biodiversity. And in the process of developing our nomination document for UNESCO to become Canada's 19th Biosphere Reserve, we included over 70 pages of lists of wildlife, marine species, lichen, fungi, and plants. The baseline of information about our region was made much more robust with the help of data provided with the help of Judith that was provided in the Biodiversity Squamish site, in addition to what was found on the BC Conservation Data Center. It's always a work in progress, and it's continually being updated, and that's why we're really in support of these tools to help build our baseline data. Biosphere reserves are about connecting people with nature, which is why these tools are one way of generating more citizen science, giving people a purpose, having them feel like they're contributing to the environment while learning more. And biosphere reserves are also about collaborating with other groups in generating volunteers. working towards the objectives of biodiversity conservation, sustainable development, and reconciliation. Biosphere reserves are places for learning, research, and monitoring. And so these tools are appropriate for that, and we have the opportunity to continue building our information and that collaboration through these tools and others, and also to help identify gaps in information that can lead to more opportunities for research. We're pleased to be presenting this webinar, and thanks so much to Kelly and Mike and Judith for building this team and putting this on today. If you want to know more about our nomination to become Canada's 19th UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, please contact me or go to our website. And I'll hand it over to Kelly.
Great, thanks. So yes, I'm with the BC Parks Foundation, and I've been working to get people excited about citizen science with an initiative called the BC Parks iNaturalist project. So first I'll give an overview of iNaturalist, also known as iNat for short, how to use it and why I think it's a great citizen science tool, then some examples of how iNat data is used, and a bit about the BC Parks project. Next. iNaturalist is both a website and free app. It's used worldwide to document and share photo observations of biodiversity. These observations can be of any wild organism, so plants, animals, fungi, lichens, algae, also signs of life such as nests, tracks, and shells. Next. Next. It can be used to learn about species ID, get ID help, and explore species found in different regions. And iNat started as an online community for naturalists to connect and share observations and connect people to nature and outdoor spaces, and it has since grown into a global repository of citizen science biodiversity data. So in its simplest form, without a user account, iNat can be used as an interactive resource to learn about what species are found in an area. You can explore observations that have been made, filtered by variables such as location, time, species, or group, user, and more. And this is a screenshot from the website's Explore sections. You can see Vancouver Island highlighted on the top left. I filtered by most recently added observations from Vancouver Island. You can also visualize observations on a map. Here I filtered by amphibians on Vancouver Island, and with the bar on the right showing information for a few of these observations. You can use these parameters to create projects which generate great ready-made species lists. Projects are made for a number of reasons, such as tracking observations in a nature reserve or recording BioBlitz results. Project species lists are also great for learning more about what is likely to be found in a given area, such as this project here on the right for Cypress Provincial Park. So a few examples from this webinar that you might be interested in are the BC Parks iNaturalist project and its many individual park projects, Squamish, or Biodiversity Squamish, and the Howe Sound Proposed Biosphere Reserve project. Next. So it's helpful to think of iNat as first and foremost an online community for sharing biodiversity photos. You can use any photo taking tool, phone, digital camera, tablet, even film. Think of it first as taking photos, so making observations, and then you can add those photos to iNat for ID assistance, sharing your data, or whatever other reason, at your own convenience, whenever works for you, using either the website or the phone app. Some iNat users are scanning and sharing film observations from decades ago as a result. It's also helpful to recognize that iNat can be used for a number of different reasons. So many people think of it as just an app-based tool for getting ID help, but it can also be used for sharing photos, keeping personal species lists and outdoor exploration records, and to contribute to a broader understanding of biodiversity. It can also be used by groups as a monitoring tool or a way to record BioBlitz results. Next. So on to actually making observations. If you've heard of or used iNat before, you're likely more familiar with the app. The app is great for getting on-the-spot species ID suggestions when you're out in nature, but it only really works in the field when you have data or Wi-Fi connection. So taking photos and uploading them via the app means the photos are easily geotagged with your exact location. You'll need to turn on your location services in your phone's settings for this. And the app is most useful when you're working with a small number of photos, but it doesn't easily facilitate adding a lot of photos or observations at once. Next. These screenshots show the process of uploading a photo observation. So I had already taken the photo, so I selected choose image. Then on the next screen, fill in all the details in that middle screen there. So when you tap the field for species or what did you see, iNat provides a handful of suggestions. I could either choose one of the suggestions, search for something else, or type in a placeholder name like plant if I'm working offline. In this case, I knew it was spotted coral root, which was the first suggestion, and the location, date, and time fields are already pre-filled, so you can see those in that middle panel. And then I check upload, that check mark at the top right of that middle panel, and my observation is added to the iNat database for the community to see, add IDs, and comment upon. Next. Another method of adding observations is via the website using a computer. So this method is better when you're working with larger numbers of photos. The website itself also has more functionality than the app for exploring other observations, projects, users, and information on species. This method also allows you to add old photos that may be sitting unused on your hard drive, unseen by anyone except maybe occasionally you. And if you're tech savvy, there are also geotagging options for cameras. The app GPS 4Cam is one example of that. Next. These screenshots show what the website upload process looks like. You can also get suggestions when you click in the species name field on the left. And if you took the photo on a non-phone camera and don't have exact GPS location, you can click location, and then you get to choose the location of the observation off of the map. You can be as specific or as general with the location as you would like, dragging that round or that red circle smaller or bigger. With this method, you drag and drop as many photos as you'd like into the upload window, and then there's an option to select all the photos of one observation and combine them together. You can see there's a little grayed out combine on the left-hand panel. There's also the option visible on the left-hand side to edit the observation details for all selected images. So to provide the same location information for multiple observations, you simply select them all and then fill in those details on that left-hand bar. Next. So I've mentioned iNat's ID system a couple times now. It's a two-step process. So when you're out in the field using the app and looking for ID suggestions, you'll be relying on the first step, the computer vision AI system that's based on iNat's database of images for different species. So here I've uploaded an image of a leather star, and iNat's system provided suggestions. You can see it provided Dermasterius, the genus, as its main recommendation, and then under that it has a few species-specific recommendations. iNat has to have at least 100 observations of a species for that, or observations of a species for that species to be included in the AI system. And the more images it has, and the better the images are, the better its suggestions will be. So taking good quality observational photos is helpful not just to you when you're looking for ID help, but also to others and improving the AI system. Next.
Okay, sorry. Okay, here you go.
The second step is the community ID stage, where other iNat users can confirm IDs, add corrections, and comment on your observations. So this observation of a shaggy mane mushroom reached research grade status, which is iNat's consideration of that, once it had 2 agreeing species level IDs. Next. This one has even more than 2. You can see in that activity panel, there's a few agreeing IDs. And that's great because the more agreeing IDs, the more trustworthy the data is. Next. So in summary, you can use iNaturalist to get species IDs for your own interest, to create an interactive record of your outdoor explorations, share your own expertise with other users, as well as have it be somewhere to put all your nature photos. And while I hope I've sparked your interest in what iNat can do for you, your observations can also be really great as data to help improve the understanding of biodiversity in a number of different ways. Next. So to start, the more eyes on the ground making and sharing nature observations helps us get a more accurate picture of biodiversity. So on the left, these are the observation numbers from BC Parks from about a year ago. when the BC Parks iNaturalist project had just started. At that time, arbutus was the most commonly observed species, which is completely unrepresentative of the province, being found only on the south coast. Almost a year later, numbers on the right, the numbers of species found in BC Parks had doubled on the numbers found on iNat, with more representation from many different taxonomic groups, and Salal is now the most commonly observed species, which makes a lot more sense. Next. And more than just a repository for personal use, citizen science data on iNat can be used to help improve understanding of known species locations, find new locations, and find more observations. These observations can be used to track change, such as range shifts due to climate change or the spread of invasive species, as well as for disease monitoring, detecting threatened species, and to overall complement species inventories conducted by biologists. Next. For example, for range expansions, take this example of the sea palm kelp Postelsia palmiformis. The red dots are all observations made on iNaturalist. They show all the records for the species in this region. Its recorded range doesn't go past Vancouver Island, but very fresh plants have washed up on Calvert Island on the central coast. And you can see in that lone observation expanded on the right-hand side in the little panel, or the little window, indicates the range may be further north than previously thought. Next. This third image shows the details of that observation that comes up when it's clicked on. So you can expand and see the details of each individual observation. Next. iNaturalist can be useful for documenting how diseases affect wildlife populations, such as sea star wasting disease. So the Tracking Starfish Wasting and Recovery Project provides a way to collect photos of healthy and diseased sea stars, which gives useful information about the date and location of where diseased stars occur. Next. And it's been really great to see observations of threatened species appear in the BC Parks iNat project, like the species of Badlands tiger beetle seen in the South Okanagan grasslands protected area and listed as endangered by the BC Conservation Data Center. iNat data on species at risk is increasingly used by conservation scientists and managers, including the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, BC Parks, and the BC Conservation Data Center. This example also shows how experts can weigh in on an observation with their own expertise. Next. So this panel, this activity panel, shows that there's some discussion about what species it potentially could be, and ultimately they came to a conclusive ID. Next. iNat can also be useful for tracking invasive species, such as these projects set up by the BC Inter-Ministry Invasive Species Working Group. So there are a few different projects collected in this umbrella project. Each project contains observations of invasive species according to their appropriate management action, such as containment and prevention. And then got an expansion of some of those invasive species on the right to show which ones are most commonly observed. Next. And the data is also of interest to BC Parks to get a better understanding of the state of biodiversity in provincial parks and protected areas. And this is particularly valuable because compared to many other park systems, BC Parks is quite underfunded. So BC Parks, the University of Victoria, Simon & Fraser University, the SFU rep I think might be listening in, John Reynolds, and the BC Parks Foundation have partnered on the BC Parks iNaturalist project to get parks visitors to document the biodiversity they see when out exploring parks. This project was launched last year with what we call the BC Parks Big Summer, for which 3 teams went around the province, conducted daily bioblitzes in BC Parks, collecting hundreds of observations per day. So collectively, they ended up visiting over 150 parks across the province. And they engaged with various different naturalist groups on the way. Next. You can see these gray dots are all the spots that they hit up throughout the summer last year. Next. They visited a huge diversity of ecosystems across the province: shoreline, alpine, grasslands, forests, bogs, meadows, and more. Beautiful spots, lots of beautiful photos. Next. They collaborated with BC Park staff and naturalists as they went. Next. and saw many, many very cool and beautiful species. This is just a very small handful. Next. And I'd love to be able to encourage you to join us in this effort with the BC Parks iNat project by going out and collecting as many observations in parks as you can. But of course, our current pandemic situation means all BC Parks facilities are closed and many parks are fully closed off from any access in order to encourage physical distancing to slow the spread. So instead, I will encourage you to become a bit of an armchair naturalist. So check out the BC Parks iNaturalist project page, that top link there on the left, to see all the observations that have been made so far, see if there are any that you can help ID. And this is also a great time to upload any nature photos you have languishing on your hard drive unseen for a while. You can also get more help with getting started with the BC Parks Foundation's how-to guide, downloadable at bcparksfoundation.ca/iNaturalist, that center link there. And if you're lucky enough to have a backyard or live in a place where it's easy and safe to go on socially distanced walks and hikes, then go test out your new iNat skills so you can be ready for when parks reopen. And you can contact me with either of those avenues, either email address or on iNaturalist. And with that, I will pass it off to Judith to talk about iNat and Biodiversity Squamish.
Hello, here are the 5 points I'll address: the Biodiversity Squamish iNaturalist project, how to search this site, tips for making useful observations, the amazing responses which come from the iNaturalist community, and exciting collaborations underway. Next. Biodiversity Squamish is based in Squamish, but our boundary is the Howe Sound watershed. This is the same boundary as that of the Akatsam Howe Sound UNESCO Biosphere Region initiative. Both projects are within the larger boundary of the Salish Sea. Biodiversity Squamish is collaborating with the Salish Sea iNaturalist project and the UNESCO initiative. Next. When you click on observations on our homepage, you'll see that they are chronologically posted. The top left is the most recent. Please know that it is quick and very easy to sort the site for what you want to find. Here's how. Next. Click on observations. That's our homepage. Click. In the box labeled species, enter an English or a Latin name, as specific or general a category as you need. English is fine for general categories such as birds or mammals, and for smaller groups such as on this slide. But if you want to see all the examples on this site for a specific species, use the Latin name. iNaturalist's common names are American, and they often differ from ours in British Columbia. For now, just leave the location box blank and press Go. Next. To make observations that provide good identification clues and are useful, here are just a few tips. Each observation focuses on an example of one species. Take several photos from different angles to highlight key features. Details of the flower or fruit are particularly helpful for identification. With a bit of practice, your hand lens can enable macro photos using your phone. Have some sort of object in one photo to provide scale. Include a photo to show the surroundings, its habitat. For some groups, it is important to photograph what the species is growing on, its substrate. When in the field, take lots of photos. Then back at home, crop photos as needed, choose your best, and upload them as one observation. If you return another time and take more photos of this example, this will be a separate observation. iNaturalist also has a way to make audio observations, but it is a little bit awkward at present. There is great interest in being able to upload bird songs and calls, for example. A simple way to do this will likely soon become available. Next. The description box enables another way to add useful details. For example, the lichen in the previous photo is so tiny, just 2 centimeters, that my photo of this lichen in its habitat was a Where's Waldo picture. Therefore, I use the description box for the habitat and substrate information. Likewise, in this slide, words describe the habitat and identify the 2 animals on this fragrant white bog orchid. Can you see the spider, Myzomina vatia, hiding above the unfortunate bumblebee, Bombus mixtus? Next. When photographing with your phone, use the camera, then open the iNaturalist app and upload your best photos from the camera roll. This enables you to upload several photos for this observation. Next. If you are within the boundary of Biodiversity Squamish, please remember to click on Projects and enter Biodiversity Squamish. Next. In addition to the phone app option, it's also fine to take your pictures with a camera. Almost all my photos are with the camera, and I upload to the website. The website, as Kelly mentioned, enables many more possibilities than the app does. Next. It's truly inspiring that iNaturalist makes it possible for us to have conversations with community members living in different parts of the world. This one was about the ID of this strawberry plant leaf. Next. Increasingly, research scientists such as Aaron Liston are following iNaturalist and finding that this platform provides a structure for citizen science data that can make the data useful to their research. Aaron Liston is a professor at Oregon State University. His current research focus is the strawberry genus. Next. This productive dialogue about the strawberry hybrid is one of many examples. It also resulted in the BC Conservation Data Centre welcoming the new information and updating their record for this species. iNaturalist facilitates teamwork. Next. The Salish Sea Biodiversity Project is an international initiative to document the biodiversity of the Salish Sea. It is also distinctive in being a multidisciplinary initiative. The data of iNaturalist projects within the boundary is collected into the Salish Sea iNaturalist project. Biodiversity Squamish is an active member of this larger body. Next. Andrew Simon at the University of Victoria is the creator and visionary behind the Salish Sea Biodiversity Project. The title of the presentation Andrew prepared for this now cancelled conference is Networking Biodiversity Projects Within the Salish Sea. Antranig Basman in London, England is the computer programmer. He is developing a highly sophisticated and very creative system to portray the data and to enable scientifically valid comparison of the data. Salish Sea Biodiversity is a project that is right in line with Antranig's focus on sustainable, open source development for the academic sector. The title of the presentation he prepared is Building Bridges Between Biodiversity Projects with Diverse Standards. These 2 titles provide just a glimpse into the exciting work underway. That's it.
Thank you, Judith and Kelly. So we've got time for questions at this point before we launch into Mike and the Reporter Weed apps. So if you want to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask a question, and while you're figuring that out, there is a question here from Rachel, and she asks if any of the presenters can provide suggestions for iPhone lens attachment to take macro photos.
Oh, that's a very good question. I know John Reynolds is listening in right now, and his daughter has a really good one that I'm blanking on the name of right now. Yeah, there's a clip-on thing. I think it just came from Amazon. There's a clip-on macro lens that took amazing photos. So I think if you just search Amazon, you might be able to find a successful one. But I personally haven't tested out any, so I'm not really sure if I can provide specific recommendations, but they're out there.
Is there anyone else on the line that wants to answer?
Yeah, I have a few questions if you don't mind.
Sure. Jessica, just before we go on that, if you could hold just one sec, I think is John Reynolds on the line. Do you want to have something to add, John?
Sure. So my preferred method is to use a 10 times hand lens, which I just simply hold up to the lens of my phone. And I like that because then it's quick. I don't need to snap something on and off according to what I'm photographing. So that's my own method, but you're quite right. There's lots of options out there.
And just want to acknowledge your work, John, and it must be really rewarding to see how it's impacting our just learning and knowledge and hopefully protections and more restoration.
Well, yes, thanks. And, you know, as you know, it's been a big team effort with Brian Starzomsky, of course, and Kelly and everyone else. But, and I can certainly reinforce the comment that was made about it being useful for conservation, because in CSIWC, the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, we are using iNaturalist and other citizen science projects like eBird a lot. So it's very helpful as well as being a lot of fun.
Yeah. Oh, great work. Thank you. And Jessica, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks. Also, hi, John. But thanks, ladies. That was really very helpful. I was aware of iNaturalist, but not really familiar with a lot of what it can do. So that was great. Yeah, I kind of just have a few nuts and bolts questions. One of them is, can you share a photo to multiple projects at the same time? So if I took a sea star picture in Howe Sound and I wanted to put it on the sea star wasting, but also the biodiversity.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. So the Biodiversity Squamish project is a bit different from the BC Parks project. Most projects made now are what are called the collection projects that automatically, if an observation meets the requirements of that project, whoever set it up meets the requirements, the geographic requirements, the species requirements, whatever they are, that observation will be automatically collected by whichever projects it fits within. And so most projects now work that way. There are a few, if they have specific needs, requirements that you can't really jig correctly for the that more common way. There's some projects called traditional projects that you have to submit your observations to, which is the Biodiversity Squamish one and the Sea Star one are both examples of that. And Judith, do you have anything to add about traditional projects?
Yes, I do. I quite often get requests from different parts of the world for observations that they want to add to their project. So it does happen. It has a little more manual way, but it's definitely happening in force. And in the short term, I know from the iNaturalist website that they are working very hard on enabling a transition from iNaturalist traditional projects to enable all projects to be automatically added wherever relevant.
That's very cool. Yeah, thanks for that.
So the BC Parks one is any observation that fits within the requirements, unless individual users can request that their observations have to be asked for, but that is not the default setting when you sign up. So in general, all observations that fit within the requirements of the BC Parks project will be collected by it.
Okay, that's really cool.
And project managers of traditional projects will be going out and looking for observations that they can collect themselves, and so they'll send requests, as Judith mentioned.
Awesome, that's cool. One second quicker question. I love that the species IDs are kind of crowdsourced and that they generate discussion. Is there a way to change the submitted species name if you have someone who's a taxonomist that can verify things, or does it have to be withdrawn from the, like, by the person that originally submitted it?
So iNaturalist has I think a process where people can get into discussion with the people who make those decisions at the software level, the level that, you know, those species names are set at. And I think they try the very best. They have a standard that they go by for what is the current accepted name. And I think I'm not sure if it's like certain publication level or, you know, is accepted within GBIF standards or something. But I'm not sure what that standard is, but they do have a process where people can get into discussion if they have new information to add, if they have that expertise.
Okay.
One of the real advantage of iNaturalist is that your nomenclature is automatically updated by iNaturalist. So that used to be a very slow point in making spreadsheets that you had to update manually. Now, this is a huge asset iNaturalist is offering.
Great. Okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we'll move on, and we have time at the end as well for more questions.
There's one question in the chat about, can a professional photographer share and still retain copyright? And yes, when you are adding your own photos, you can set what you want the copyright level to be at. And so most people, I think, have it set at a Creative Commons license that allows for non-commercial use, and you can change those settings within your own profile settings to have all rights reserved if you would like.
Okay, great. Thanks. So moving on, Mike, over to you.
Good morning. Yes. The slides look a little stretched. Is that correct?
I'll work on that while you
No problem.
carry on.
That is the first slide, nevertheless. So, yes. Good morning. Report a Weed is an application developed as a collaborative project between the Invasive Species Council of BC and FLNRO. Started back in 2012 with the release of an Android version of the application, followed by an iOS version in 2016. So it's been around for a couple of years. It does have two sister apps, the Invasives BC app and the Best Management Practices app, both very similar. They report different types of invasives to different groups within the province. But this particular talk today is focusing on Report a Weed BC specifically. So the application is downloaded free of charge. To date, roughly 3,500 downloads, about 500 a year at this point in time. We should have included in-app purchases to fund ongoing development, but we never did. As the name implies, the application is designed to allow you to report a sighting of an invasive plant specifically in BC. It does only work in BC, but it does work on most of the platforms, iPhones, iPads, and it's fairly intuitive to use. And we'll show you a bit of that this morning. Next. The application itself is synced for use offline or online. All the submissions are saved to an online database with our service provider. The reports are ultimately channeled to a number of invasive plant specialists within the province for further action. Confirmed reports are cross-referenced with the provincial repository, IAP, which is the Invasive Alien Plant Program. It contains around 130,000 plant locations and about 600,000 treatment records going back to 2008. So this particular application really flags potential new outbreaks of plants, and it allows plant specialists to confirm that new plant or existing plant and deal with the treatment and management of it. iApp itself, though, is currently being redesigned as a new web and mobile application extending to all invasive plants, animals, fish in the province as well. And that's due to release roughly this time next year. Next. The reporting weed application is pretty simple, not anywhere near as complex or in-depth as iNaturalist. It really just allows you to identify a plant, either through searching for names or the flower color or whatever. And there's a lot of pictures. You can look at the database that's in the application, scroll through the plant pictures, and determine if what you're looking at is invasive or not, and make a report based on what you're seeing, based on what other photographs are in the system. You can look at these photos for those plants. There's lots of different pictures of the plant at different stages of its growth to help you identify what it is. And then finally, you can add your own picture to the report that you're submitting, and that helps the invasive plant specialist confirm the identification and then link that observation that you've made to the provincial inventory. Next. So the app does use your the GPS on your mobile device. It's an important component of the report. Without the location, we can't really do much more on the report because that location will tie into other invasive plants in the province that are visible on the map. Which means if you're out in the field and you're taking pictures and you don't have your GPS on, and then you go back to your office and you turn your GPS on, the location of that plant is going to be not properly located, makes things harder to find down the road. So location is important, and being able to grab that location at the time you're doing the report is important. Next. So how does it actually work? Well, quite simply, you first of all identify where your plant is, or what plant is that you're reporting. You can do that either through a common name, the Latin name, or the flower color. And you can scroll through the list and look at the pictures and ultimately identify what you believe you're looking at. Next. Once you've identified what you think you're looking at, you can report that particular plant and begin the process of creating a report. Next. You can enter some specifics about that. Primarily what you believe the area of infestation is, rough guess as to what you think the area coverage is. You can provide your email and your phone number, and you can provide a comment as well. You don't necessarily have to add your name or phone number, but if someone down the road needs to get in contact with you, makes it much more easier. And that's pretty well it for the report. You can add a picture, an existing photo, or take a photo to supplement the report. And submit. There's a simple button, and that's it. And that information is, like I say, sent to a invasive plant specialist. It's based on the location and the nature of the plant. Overall, there isn't a lot of information that gets sent with the report, not nearly as much as iNaturalist. The intent of the app is simply to help identify new sightings, new locations of invasives, and hopefully either supplement the current inventory, or direct someone to go visit that site and do a formal survey and deal with any treatment or management components down the road. There's another tidbit on the application. You can review the last 500 or so submissions on a map. Sometimes useful if you want to see if that plant that you're looking at is local, or if it's been heavily reported in an area, more just for interest sake, I guess, for the folks using it. But it does have some limited uses in that it's only looking at the last 500 or so submissions. Next, and that's pretty well the conclusion. Those are some contact URLs and emails for us and the program. And yeah, that's about it. Should there be any questions, we can certainly entertain them at this point, or for the others.
Thanks, Mike. Did you want to mention your April 7th?
Yes, April 7th. This new application, the Report Invasives project, is under development right now. It's a web and a mobile-based application, and had a webinar early in March, sort of outlining how the application development is coming along, what some of the things are looking like, and what some of the functionality is going to be. So that webinar was March 7th, and I'm repeating that same webinar next week, April 7th. I will actually send out this invitation to the group today. And if you're interested in seeing what is coming down the pipe in terms of the invasive species project, you're more than welcome to attend that webinar next week.
And that'll include the marine species invasive.
It's designed for, like I said, plants, animals, fish, birds. Yeah, doesn't matter the nature of the invasive. So.
Great. Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
So we have time for questions again. And in the meantime, while you're thinking, I'm just going to repeat a question that was sent in from Claire of the Sea to Sky Invasive Species Council, and asking about when the data is emailed to a staff person at the ministry for verification. And only the high priority species actually get manually entered into the provincial database, IAP. As far as she understands, the lower priority species don't get entered, and she said she'd love to be corrected. So Mike, do you want to just answer that again?
Yes, certainly the higher priority ones are looked at first. It really depends on the volume of reports that are coming in, and if there are specific plants, there's a priority list for the province and for the regions. Those are identified in IAP and would see more immediate action than some of the lower priority ones. The lower priority ones, if there is a location or a sighting already in IAP, then that information is, sorry, the new observation isn't appended to the existing observations that might be in the inventory. So, but they are still reviewed, but they may not constitute a new observation if something already exists. If something doesn't exist in the database, then a record is maintained in IAP for that new location that was reported.
Great, thank you. Just want to mention that this photo on the screen here is at Halkett Bay Provincial Marine Park. A few of us went over and we're looking, and we recorded the holly explosion in that park. A lot of the islands have many years ago, I guess, holly was planted by settlers, and it has not been managed, and so it's a project that I'm hoping to generate some volunteers to come into and help, and working with BC Parks staff on arranging methods and a date for tackling at least the Halkett Bay and possibly the Plumper Cove marine parks. So, you know, that was my experience too, is that holly wasn't appearing to be a priority species, but I was speaking with someone in the Powell River Invasive Species Council, and then on island just off of Nanaimo is a provincial park, and they're working with First Nations, and they've documented 1,253 invasive holly plants that they're tackling. So yeah, so that's just an example from somebody who didn't know anything much about any of these apps or the methodologies, but the app was really useful because the people I was with were very handy on using the technology, and it was great to see it actually uploaded and showing up on the map.
Yeah, to add to that, in some cases with some invasive plants in the province, if you look at Scotch broom, for instance, a lot of Scotch broom on Vancouver Island, they're not actively dealing with any management other than containment for that particular species on the island. But if Scotch broom shows up in the Okanagan, then it's a higher priority, more directed activity is dealt with, for that particular plant, because they can't do much about Scotch broom on Vancouver Island, but they can spend their time and energy on dealing with plants that are invading new areas, and they can be treated in some way. So
great. So are there any other questions? Or?
There are a couple in the chat.
Oh, great. So from Rosie, is there any way intermediate age school children can get involved with invasive species removal as a community project? And I have another one, a couple here.
Well, some invasive species are quite toxic and they shouldn't even be handled. Some removals do require herbicides, but there are some that can actively be mechanically dealt with, pulled or cut. It really depends on the species. More important though is that if groups in the community are actively going out and removing plants, where are they removing those plants to? Are they properly able to dispose of the plant, or are they simply going to be spreading it to the dump? So that's kind of where the ISCBC comes in with their regional groups. They have an active program, community programs. They deal with the disposal and the proper or the best practices for the removal of plants. They certainly can help with the identification of those species that are toxic, and you shouldn't actually be trying to remove them physically. So
is that working with the individual species councils?
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Great. And so Rachel had a question: how can I tell if an iNaturalist project is a traditional project or a collection project? Whether I need to manually add the observation.
Yeah, Ruth, if you go to, I think one of Judith's slides, one of her first slides there's a banner across the project page that says add observations. The very first one, scroll up, down, what, next one, there, that one. Yeah, so there's that banner across the top photo that says add observations, and that usually indicates that it's a traditional project where you have to actively add the observations to it. Other ones will look, now, Ruth, if you go to, let's see, the screen on, or the slide on mine that had the BC Parks iNaturalist project near the end. Yeah, that one, perfect. Or that one works too. So it will look a lot different. That priority invasive species project is just the collection project. It doesn't, you don't see the full screen there, but it doesn't have that red banner going across the top of the main page. So that is a good indication, pretty simple way to determine which is which.
Also, when you're adding it will show right up on the screen where you're adding. A collection project will automatically pop up as visible.
Great. Okay. And there's another question here: is how is the Howe Sound Biosphere Initiative harnessing the Biodiversity Squamish's projects biodiversity data to support the initiative? Initially, where it was most helpful was with the compiling of our information about our region to submit to UNESCO. So in order to, well, one of the criteria is to demonstrate how biosphere regions are able to understand the biodiversity that they have. So you have to indicate the already existing work that's going on to track your biodiversity. So it was most helpful to be able to speak to the tools to point to the actual Biodiversity Squamish app project and the extensive amount of information that was in there. And ongoing, again, it's just part of demonstrating that continuum of learning, knowledge, identifying gaps in information, and then education. So we're working to support, and we'll hopefully do more. One of the objectives for this webinar and to bring it to more people and have other organizations that in turn share it is to help to fill in data on areas that currently are pretty low on observations. So in particular, the islands, Gambier Island in particular, Keats Island, and where there's really an incredible amount of value in the natural world, in natural biodiversity there. And so that's a couple of the ideas. And then hopefully, we can talk about species at risk a little bit more. That's the other thing that this nomination process is bringing to the forefront is marine, well, all the different species that are at risk. I would love to spend more time on understanding the work that's going on to protect those species right now, and then how can we help to educate people, connect people to the existing information, and what do we do about that? I don't think many people from my travels in Howe Sound understand the value of the marbled murrelet, for instance. Yep, there's a tremendous amount of information about it. It is at risk, and so I think more people that observe the bird that are not bird people necessarily, but have an appreciation for that species would connect more to reasons why we need to protect the old growth forests.
Thank you, Ruth. It's nice to have that insight. And it's also nice to connect briefly from Galliano Island here. This is Andrew.
Oh,
great. Hooray.
Thanks for joining us. We have 1 minute left if there's any last question. Otherwise, I'd like to thank our presenters again, and thank you guys for tuning in, and to all of you that have contributed greatly to this, these projects, and look forward to working with BC Parks and Foundation in particular to build the data in the parks and ultimately protect and get rid of some of these invasive species there. All right, with that, we'll sign off. Any last words from the presenters?
No, just thanks for joining. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I like answering iNat related stuff, especially on iNaturalist itself.
And if you look at the website, the iNaturalist website, there's a tremendous amount of very helpful information that will perhaps answer some questions for you.
Good. Thanks, everyone. And if you would like to get more information on the April 7th webinar, Mike will be sharing that, and I can share or connect you with that webinar as well.
This is John.
Right.
Thanks very much, everybody, for organizing this. Ruth, Kelly, Judith, and Mike.
Great. Thank you. And take care, everyone. Stay safe and healthy
You too.
and
Thank
sane. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.